Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We're your hosts and co-founders of FantasyForesight.com, coming to you from the Rambo Fixture Company studios. I'm Ben.
And I'm Jay.
You ready to get rolling, Jay?
You know it. Let's do this.
All right, let's go. Welcome in, everyone. It is Thursday, July 2nd, and we have got a very fun and unique 12-team, 12-person, no-ghost team, full PPR, 10-round mock draft for you tonight with the vast majority of our league mates and one of our buddies, Travis Sumter, on Twitter. So we're going to be walking through the first 3 rounds of a 10-round mock, and it's going to be a fun one. How you doing tonight, Jay?
Oh, Ben, you said it. This is going to be a fun episode. Really the first ever Fantasy Foresight Mock Draft. Full 12 participants, like you said. It was a lot of fun. I can't wait to dive in, pick them apart, and really see how our picks lined up with average draft positions, and then, picking our favorites and maybe even more fun, our least favorites at the end of the episode. Steve, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
Fellas, all I know is we're heading into the 4th of July weekend. There are going to be some fireworks. Woo!
Yes, sir. So how we formatted this mock draft, it is full PPR. It was only 10 rounds with 8 starters, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and then 1 flex, a running back, wide receiver, or tight end. No super flex, no double QB, not even a defense or kicker for this one, just the positions that everybody wants to hear about. And we're going to cover pick by pick the full first 3 rounds. And then afterwards, we're going to post all of the various drafts in their totality, like 101 through 103 is going to be grouped together, 4 through 6, 7 through 9, and 10 through 12. And we're going to have a poll for each one so you guys can decide who you think won the mock draft. And then the winners will face off in a final 4. And then the remaining 2 will go head-to-head to decide who was the 2020 Mock Draft 1.0 winner on Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. And like Jay said at the end, we're going to be picking our 3 favorite, and we're definitely going to be picking our least favorite as well. And it'll be interesting to see how much those opinions vary or line up. So without further ado, guys, let's jump right into it. Last year we did one of these mock drafts, and the majority of the league was just auto draft, like ghost players. This was 12 real live people doing a slow format PPR draft, and I was at the 112 last year, so I got the 101 this year. Of course, I went with Christian McCaffrey, running back 1 at the 101 overall. I learned this at ESPN.com today. He is the only player in NFL history he is the second. There is only one player in NFL history to catch more passes
there you go.
in their first 3 seasons than Christian McCaffrey, and that is Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas had 321 receptions in his first 3 years. Christian McCaffrey had 303.
Wow.
The lowest yards per touch in Christian McCaffrey's career is 5.5, and it's been 6 and 5.9 last 2 seasons. Considering this is a full PPR league and 33% of his touches come through the air, yeah, it's a no-brainer for me.
What's the expectation here? He's the RB1. He's a consensus RB1 at a valuable position, and you said it. His production's been unbelievable, and you got to ride that wave as long as it lasts. So no surprise whatsoever.
Yeah, the CMC. Move on.
Without a doubt. Number 2 is where it starts getting interesting. Our guy Mike at Foresight Focus at the 102 going with Saquon Barkley, the running back 2 off the board. That lines up with his ADP at fantasyfootballcalculator.com according to 12-team PPR redraft formats. And you can't argue against Saquon here. Zeke has been a bit more durable, so that's probably the direction that I'd go personally, but it is super close for me. And Saquon did have 20-plus 20 plus yard rushes in 12 games last year, and that was good for RB6 in that stat metric. He was RB3 in Foresight consistency, and in 2 years, he's averaged 1,700 total yards and 11.5 touchdowns per season.
Yep, he's a decent player. Go Bucks, Steve.
Similar to what Ben said, I certainly like Saquon. You're kind of splitting hairs in a way, taking him over Zeke or the other way around. But, for me, I think Saquon's a better talent over Ezekiel Elliott. However, I like the offense Zeke's in a whole heck of a lot more. So, for me anyways, I would take Zeke here. But, still a good
Come on,
pick.
man. Daniel Jones is going to lead the renaissance in New York. Get on the train, Steve. Come on. Don't be a hater this early in the episode.
That's what I do.
I'm kidding. Really,
honestly, I'm surprised.
I was going to say, what I'm waiting for is the first couple picks are pretty standard. I think it's going to be what you see in most leagues out there. It's really, when does that first wide receiver creep in? And then things start to get interesting after that. So CMC, Saquon, I can't argue too much with that start. Like you said, the Zeke question comes in, but we'll see what happens next.
I mean, I'm surprised you guys didn't argue for Zeke a little bit more.
I was waiting. I was waiting till we get to him.
At the 103 spot, our resident physical therapist, Russ, got Zeke as RB3 at the 103. I don't know if it's because of the COVID news or what, but I was shocked to see that his ADP is currently RB6 at the 108, 7th overall. That's just silly to me because Zeke's durability at the running back position makes him as safe as a bet as any at the top of the draft. I feel like Zeke got unfairly trashed last year also for having a, quote, down year, yet among all running backs, he ranked 5th in both fantasy points and fantasy points per game, 3rd in both regular consistency and consistency weeks 10 to 16, and finally, he ranked 2nd in Foresight consistency. Again, he is my emphatic 102, and it's not even close for me.
This is where I was going to start firing it up a little bit. Getting Zeke at 103 makes complete sense, and he could very well go 102 overall. The fact that he's currently going 7th overall in drafts as the RB6 is just ridiculous. And you said it, Ben. His durability and his consistency is unmatched. And if I'm going to bank on a running back at this point in drafts, I mean, where am I going to put that money? I got to bank on a guy who's going to be there all 16 games during the fantasy season, and Saquon has shown that may or may not be the case. And like Steve said, I like this offense so much better than that one in New York. So I'm a Zeke guy, go Bucks, and yeah, I would have taken him 102, but I'm proud of our league for taking him 103 and not letting him slide to a ridiculous 107 or 108.
Okay, so I'll put up a little bit more of a fight when it comes to taking Zeke. So at least when we look at last year, and, I know no year repeats itself, obviously, but so Ezekiel Elliott had 59 rushing attempts in the red zone to Saquon's 28. Obviously, Saquon missed 4 games, but, if you take those averages, Zeke's, just more heavily used there. And then when you look at goal line touches, like within the 5-yard line, Zeke, 12 carries, converted for 9 touchdowns, Saquon 7 for a single touchdown. So, to me, it just speaks to, again, the offenses they're in, the offensive lines that they're in. It's almost like Emmitt Smith and Barry Sanders back in the day. I'm sure Barry Sanders, if you put him on the Dallas Cowboys in the 90s, probably would have been a stud, maybe even more so than Emmitt Smith, but that's not what happened. Right now, Ezekiel Elliott is the running back of the Dallas Cowboys on that offense, and I will take that all day long over a guy who might be more talented of a running back, but I'm sorry, he's on the New York Giants. It is what it is.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well done. All right, now does it start to get even more interesting?
Absolutely. You know what? The next several picks are extremely interesting, and this one really surprised me. 104 overall, our guy at Foresight Family, Zach, takes the first wide receiver off the board at the 104, New Orleans Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas. He's also going as the wide receiver 1, according to ADP right now, at 3rd overall, which that surprised me. I mean, I think there's just a couple more running backs that I would prefer before, 3rd overall when you start going with the wide receiver. I will say, though, Michael Thomas was prolific in his record-setting season in 2019. For me, I still would have gone running back here because there are a couple worthy remaining running backs. And though you take what the draft gives you, high-end running backs are always harder to find later than high-end wide receivers. But this is a full PPR league, so you can't hate it too much. If someone is extremely risk averse, which I happen to know to be true in the case of our guy Zach, so it does actually make a lot of sense for me when you look at the risky running backs that are going right after him.
Well, you made a great point. We're talking full PPR here, and Michael Thomas is a target monster and a reception machine. And really, there is a little bit of a break in tier here between the running backs. So, in my view, Michael Thomas fits right in with this next group of running backs. So, if your preference is to go big-time scoring, maybe the elite and premier receiver in fantasy football versus one of these next group of running backs, then, I'm not going to fault you for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. It makes a lot of sense from the standpoint of being risk adverse. Certainly, when you do consider, for me initially, it's like, oh, he'll take Alvin Kamara. Well, with Kamara, there's going to be some question marks. We look at the season he had last year versus what he did the first 2 years in the league, and what will we get in 2020? So there's a question mark there, but it seems like, with Michael Thomas, his range of outcomes seems like either wide receiver 1, 2, or, maybe 3 if he has a down year. So, it just seems like an extremely safe pick. So, I totally get it. And, hey, I'll give a little credit to Zach there for, kind of going against the grain and not just worrying about stacking up running backs and, taking
chances. Guy. We got to get it.
Absolutely.
Now it's really going to start getting interesting, and I can't wait for a few picks from now.
I was gonna say, well, speaking of taking chances, I think the chances started with our next pick at the 105. Our buddy Josh makes Derrick Henry the PPR running back 4 off the board. According to fantasyfootballcalculator.com, he's currently going higher than I would have expected in a full PPR league as RB5 at the 107, 6 overall. I'm going to say this, Josh, you're my guy. I recruited you. I brought you into our league. I'm glad to have you. I love you like a brother. But, man, I will never understand going DH over Kamara in full PPR formats. Never. Jay never should have got his dirty paws on him at the 106, man.
Well, hey, listen. He goes with the defending rushing title winner. So, there is some reason there. Now, full PPR, is there some limited advantage there? Sure. But, Kamara had a little bit of a down season last year, scoring fantasy-wise. So, it's all about preference. I'm not going to fault Josh too much here with the pick. He's going with what?
Who you taking? Derrick Henry or Alvin Kamara?
Well, you know the answer to that.
Well, then
I'm taking Alvin Kamara, but I'm not going to beat up Josh too much for going to defend with the guy who won the rushing title last year. In an offense where he's going to get 16 games with Tannehill, which you like to say. So, it could be another big year for DH.
I think consensus on this podcast is that we would all 3 go Kamara over DH here. No, Steve?
I have written and said enough about Mr. Derrick Henry. I'll just defer to you 2 on this one and sit back and wait till we move on to the next pick.
I mean, I'm not throwing Derrick Henry out the window or far down the line, but in a full PPR format, fully healthy, it needs to be Alvin Kamara over DH, in my humble opinion. And that is exactly who fell to Jay. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
I like to say you take what the draft gives you, guys. And with the 106, the draft gave me Alvin Kamara. What can I say? Obviously, he should have never made it to me, Ben, but people act like he had an awful year in 2019. but that just wasn't true. The guy misses 2 games, guts through a handful more despite being injured, and yet still finished 12th in fantasy points, 8th in fantasy points per game consistency, and consistency weeks 10 through 16. He was 12th in Foresight consistency, and despite missing 2 games, and despite having a down year, RB11 is his floor, and the sky's the limit, and I am happy to have gotten him at the 106 as RB5.
Yeah, I mean, missing time, he was still super consistent relatively at the position. Missing time and splitting time. So, I mean, this is a guy who averaged like 15, 16 touchdowns per season in his first 2 years, splitting time with Mark Ingram. So, I mean, I just think a full 16 weeks, you know, there was a lot fewer rushing touchdowns in that offense last year than typical. And I think that goes up a little bit, and he's going to get 16 weeks of full PPR action. Kamara's a stud, man.
And yeah, you said it, Jay, as far as he still managed to be relatively consistent, and that's, you know, full PPR. You know, he's definitely somebody who I'd say Drew Brees is definitely one of the best in the league when it comes to just a quick read, fast hot read, smooth, easy catchable ball to a running back out of the backfield, and he and Kamara have that going on. So, you know, worst case scenario, you have that each and every week as long as he's healthy and on the field.
Okay, so the first 6 guys, depending on order, are usually the first 6 guys for the most part. So let's start going. Let's get into some fun now. Let's get into some picks.
Yeah, it's honestly a surprising one. Yeah. Our guy, our resident doctor at Fantasy Foresight at the 107 is usually pretty risk averse, but he goes ahead and takes Dalvin Cook off the board as the RB6. I mean, that is a little bit later. He's typically going 4th overall currently, according to ADP, as the RB3 at the 105. Dalvin going an RB6 shows you how leery our league is on him in 2020 because he's going twice as high at fantasyfootballcalculator.com. I really would have loved to get Doc's thoughts on this pick since he is so typically shying away from risk, but, you know, it's an interesting one.
I got to say, and I'm going to be completely honest, I really hated this pick. I thought, like you said, it was extremely risky until we get clarification about his situation. Look, we're doing a mock draft right now, and it's July 1st, July 2nd. We aren't at the end of August, you know, when we might have some more clarity on this situation. So you're really taking a big gamble that everything's going to work out and Dalvin Cook's going to be on the field, and you're taking that risk at the 107. And the fact that he's actually going RB3 at the 105 overall in other drafts or in ADP is just crazy to me. So, yeah, I did not like this pick. There are guys behind him that I like much, much more at this point in the preseason.
You guys know how I feel about Dalvin Cook. I just especially with the contract holdout situation, more risky than ever, and he just isn't available for an entire fantasy season. Right. Hasn't done it once in his career, so just, you know, to me, that just doesn't make him, like, for me, he's not a first round pick. So very interested, like you are, Jay, like you are, Ben, to pick Doc's brain on that one particularly. Dalvin Cook, he's like a fantasy temptress. He truly is. You know, you want to get that elusive top 3 finish out of him because he's capable of it, but, you know, can he actually do that and produce? And if you're willing to take a swing for the fences, you know, I guess go for it, but certainly not my style.
Love it.
I think we're all on the same page on that one. The next pick, I think, surprised us all as well.
Man.
At the 108 spot, our newest league mate, Ryan, makes DeAndre Hopkins the wide receiver 2 off the board. That's typically not very surprising, but I think we can all agree it's a little bit surprising this year.
Yeah.
I mean, in the same formats, but in other leagues, the ADP saying that he's going 4 spots later, 12th overall as the wide receiver 3 on average at the 111, 112 spot. And like I said, it shocked us all. One of the things I was watching for in this draft was to see how low Hopkins would go in the wide receiver group. And then he goes as wide receiver 2 ahead of Devontae Adams and Julio. I still can't believe it.
There are some shocking picks coming up. I mean, some guys slide. It's crazy. Nick Chubb's still on the board at this point. If you want elite running back in fantasy, I mean, it's nuts right now. Like you said, historically, Nook going at the 108 would actually probably be a decent pick. Good value for him. But, with a lot of question marks surrounding him on this new team, new offense, some risk there. Could it pay off? Sure. Could it not? Yes. So some safer high-end picks coming up after this that I'd probably be more comfortable with at this point. Now, Ryan tried to, bribe me by not picking on him too much, but unfortunately, not going to be the case. I did not love this pick, at least not right here.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it last week when we were talking about the wide receivers on our podcast, and I think all three of us, as a consensus, we were like, you know what? It's not even as much let's stop arguing about how many targets he's going to get.
Yeah.
It's just, do we see Kyler Murray taking a step beyond 3,700 passing yards and 20 touchdowns?
Right.
When you look at his passing statistics compared to the Deshaun Watson, it's like, well, where's it coming from that will support that kind of a finish from DeAndre Hopkins? So,
amen.
It's not that it can't happen, but yeah, it's definitely was definitely a little bit of a head scratcher. But
what do we talk about at fantasyforesight.com? We talk about probability of scoring the most fantasy points, and to me, DeAndre Hopkins has so many question marks that his probability of being the number 2 receiver in fantasy football this year is just wildly inaccurate.
Yeah, totally agree there. I'll be honest. The next one surprised even me a little bit too. At the 109, our buddy Caesar makes Nick Chubb of the Cleveland Browns the RB7 off the board. That is almost over twice as far ahead of consensus ADP out there right now. Currently has him going at the 202 as RB10 at 15th overall. So, I mean, I love Nick Chubb as much as anyone, but this is almost a whole round too early in my opinion. Chubb's drop-off once Kareem Hunt returned last season cannot be overstated. In the last 7 weeks of 2019 in full PPR leagues, when Kareem Hunt returned, he finished better than Nick Chubb 5 out of 7 times. Again, I love the Browns. I love Nick Chubb, but just 9th overall feels a little bit like a reach to me. I got to be honest.
God, you're making a great case, Ben, but I still love Chubb? I love Nick Chubb. Well, I'll say I love Nick Chubb.
You love Lance?
Yeah. I mean, if Kamara was gone when I was picking at 6, I would have been hard pressed to make a decision between DH and Nick Chubb. Honestly, I mean, I would have taken him that high. I still am a believer. I think there's a role in that offense for both players. And yeah, I mean, Mike, I have full confidence in Nick Chubb, so I have no problem with him going here. Now, that being said, DA is still on the board at this point. So, again, a little bit of a surprise, but really overall, if you're looking for a running back, I've got no problem.
Yeah, and that's kind of where, I'm at as far as, when I saw Chubb go off the board, I'm also a pretty big believer in Nick Chubb heading into this season. Like you said, Ben, there's certainly the Kareem Hunt concern, but it's a totally different offense. I think it's going to be an offense that is very run heavy, and the way they're going to utilize those running backs, I think, both could certainly eat, and Chubb will eat more of that pie than Hunt will. But when you look at the other options that were still available at a position that has, a lot less injury risk, that's what's interesting. It comes down to your philosophies. Like, how bad do you want, what you consider a rock solid RB1 over, a high end WR1? And,
yeah.
Caesar definitely, valued that running back. And I think that's why I went with Nick Chubb right there.
All right. So 8 of the, oh, sorry, Ben, did you want to add something?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say 8 of the first 10 picks are running, or 8 of the first 7. Wow. Easy for me to say. I can count. 7 of the first 9 picks are running backs. So, does that lead to then a run on wide receiver? How's it play out? Who's next?
Well, yes, it does. The next 3 in a row, actually, starting with the 110, our buddy Travis Sumter takes Julio Jones from the Atlanta Falcons as the wide receiver 3 off the board. Julio's currently going off the board, typically 13th overall as the wide receiver 4 at the 201 spot. I love Julio, love him. But to take him over Davante Adams, who may actually get close to 200 targets this season, is just something I personally would not do. It is still a rock-solid pick from the 110 spot from our buddy Travis at TJ Sumter 55 on Twitter.
Hey, I actually like this pick. I mean, DA may get flooded with targets, but that may also get him hurt. He's going to be the guy taking a load of the hits because of all those targets. And Julio, we talked about Matt Ryan and his ability to take a giant step forward in year 2 of an offense or with a new offensive coordinator, and that's where he is. So we're expecting to have kind of an outpouring of offensive production in Atlanta, and that should benefit Julio Jones. So getting him at the 110, he's going 201 overall, so a couple picks early, but as the WR3, I've got no problem with that.
Yeah, precisely. I see both your guys' points very clearly, and at first I thought, well, I'd probably take Davante Adams, but as much as we have in the past, kind of, brought up that Julio Jones sometimes is on the injury report as questionable quite a bit. He is rather durable. He is out there, and DA has missed more time the past several seasons than Julio Jones has. So. I can understand it from that perspective. If you're trying to just find like kind of like the safer of the 2 wide receivers. But now I ain't gonna lie, I was happy that Davante Adams wasn't picked right there.
So we keep bringing up DA. He goes next, right, Ben?
No, he doesn't.
Wait,
and
what?
I really want to drop a DA stat right now, but I'll save it for him. And yes, to your delight, I am sure. At the 111, our league mate, affectionately known as Uber, makes Tyreek Hill the wide receiver 4 coming off the board. May or may not have been an auto pick. I don't know. Typically, Tyreek is going at 14th overall at the 202 as wide receiver 5. I see his ADP getting much more appropriate since our last episode, Jay? But that still didn't stop him from also being taken over Davante Adams. It's just crazy to me. We know how much DA is going to eat this year. Tyreek Hill's target share is nowhere near Davante Adams. They both missed time last year. They both played the same amount of games last year. DA smoked him in all the statistics.
Well, see, okay, and you said it. As Steve mentioned, and as we just talked about Julio's pretty durable. He always has that tag week to week, but he's always out there playing at a high level. Now we get to Tyreek, who, like you said, missed a couple games, missed the same amount of games as DA. So now we're comparing apples to apples here as far as what we saw last season. And like you said, Ben, DA outperformed him really in every metric. And going forward, Kansas City added some weapons to that offense. Green Bay did not. So, he's going to be the man in that offense. And yeah, I mean, this really, with a slide like this would have been tremendous value to get DA. I like Tyreek, don't get me wrong, but yeah, a little bit of a miss here for me out of our guy Uber Taco Supreme.
Yeah, we talked again. Well, that's what I mean. Is it's interesting. We just talked about wide receivers last week, so not to like be too redundant in a lot of the stuff we say, but right. It's clear how I feel about Davante Adams. He's my clear wide receiver too. So, just moving on to the 112, I was picking there, and Davante Adams fell there. Now
you had to be tickled.
I was certainly elated. So, like heading into this draft, picking at the 112, where you're at that, well, you're going to have the last pick of the first round, first pick of the second round, then you don't pick for 22 more spots. Being someone who likes to get a couple of stud running backs and kind of build around that, I had the mindset of I got to get the best two running backs, because cupboard might be pretty bare by the time it comes back around to me again. But then there's Devontae Adams. And when you have somebody on your big board ranked as WR2 and you can get him as WR5, it's kind of rare. Yeah, it's rare in the first round you can draft a guy that still has that much meat on the bone as far as like the value you might get is concerned. So I was like, well, guess I'm scratching the 2 running backs and going to completely change my strategy because I'm going to go ahead and take Devontae Adams. So, yeah, I pulled the trigger on him at the 112 because I felt like I had to. And, like we talked about, as long as he's healthy and he's on the field, he's going to get 180-plus targets in this offense because he has to. And the beautiful thing is when you watch him play, it doesn't matter. He doesn't have, like, a Robin to him being Batman. Dude can get open. He can eat. He's an incredible wide receiver. So hopefully he can stay healthy though. That would be like the one certain, that's certainly a risk that has to be brought up with him. And that's the reason why in our league, I think that he slid to where he did.
Man, I'll tell you what, it makes it a whole lot easier for you to be less concerned about a guy's injury when he comes back from said injury and balls out the rest of the season. That's like true. Devontae Adams did. He was wide receiver 6 in fantasy points per game. Despite the missed time, he was wide receiver 5 in regular consistency, wide receiver 2 in consistency weeks 10 through 16, and wide receiver 3 in foresight consistency. The man came back from injury and absolutely balled out. I hate that he fell to you at the 112, Steve. I was at the 112 last year and had no such luck. I feel like the draft could not have broken better for someone like you at that spot who needs absolutely no help.
All right, so making the turn into the second round, Steve-O, who'd you go with on the back-to-back?
So, I just talked about typically I'd like to stack running backs here. And again, I try to take the approach of like value with each pick, if at all possible. So, on the board, I'm looking at it like, well, so I took Kenyon Drake at RB8. And some of my thought process was, well, he certainly is, there's risk there. He's never been the bell cow running back. He's never been the guy in his entire NFL career. However, we did get a glimpse into what he's capable of in Arizona's offense on the second half of last year. I think he in PPR formats was like, I think it might have been running back 4 the second half of last season, something in that ballpark. Now, obviously he had a couple like splash games that really helped support that finish, but you still had David Johnson there kind of, stealing away touches. Well, as we all know, DJ's in Houston now. And to me, that shows that Arizona has, full faith in handing this job over to Kenyon Drake. They paid the man. He's there. And they added DeAndre Hopkins, which I love. I feel like that just opens up that offense even more for someone who is dynamic in space like Kenyon Drake. So, it's a little bit of a roll of the dice, but he's somebody that I've had my eye on a lot. And again, taking him at RB8, I feel like if he's healthy and he's on the field, there is the potential for him to finish a lot higher than RB8. And I do want to say there were some other guys on the board, but they, for me, there were guys like Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs. And I know a lot of people are high on Mixon this year and thinking the Bengals are going to take a big step forward as an offense. But we talked about in our running back podcast, Joe Mixon was targeted less than Nick Chubb was last year. So in PPR, I don't know. I have a hard time seeing it. There's Miles Sanders. I just, you guys know when we talked about in the running back pod, and I think you guys might be on the same page. Just really love Kenyon Drake. So I was so happy to get Adams and Drake, like, the 1-2 turn right there.
Jay, I'll let you go first because I'm about to go off on Kenyon Drake.
Go for it, man.
I would take Kenyon Drake this year over Dalvin Cook, over Derrick Henry, and maybe even Nick Chubb, as much as I hate to say it. And here's why. Foresight consistency is a new metric that we developed this offseason that quantifies how a running back finishes versus how he started. Not just a couple of weeks, but just how he trended through the entire season. In that metric, he finished as RB8. And in seven games from weeks 9 to 16, he had 3 top 6 finishes. That was good for a percentage of almost 43%. That top 6 percentage, would have ranked third in 2019 behind only CMC and Dalvin Cook over a full season. I mean, I just think in that offense, the way they run it, having a quarterback like Kyler who's so good at running the football, adding DeAndre Hopkins, who's now going to require that much less focus on Kenyon Drake. I mean, sign me up. I am all in on Kenyon Drake in 2020.
You guys really covered it. I mean, and I'm with you, Ben. Kenyon Drake is an intriguing prospect heading into the 2020 season, and I'm with you. I would probably take him over DH. And as sad as I would be to say it, it would be painful for me to take him over Nick Chubb. But I have to. What do we always say? You got to take emotion out of this game. It's the smart play. It's the right play. And I hate, like you said, I hate the fact that he fell to Steve. Steve got 2 incredible value picks. He got 2 guys going first round, multiple spots below where they're commonly going. And I dislike it. And like you said, Steve needs no help.
In his first 2 picks, Steve got 6 total spots of value compared to the ADP out there.
At pick 13. He picked
at pick 12 and 13.
Right,
Neither
right.
DA nor Kenyon Drake should have been there for the likes of Steve. And we say that out of respect.
Yeah.
Like, we put him at the 12 for a reason. We didn't want him to win this thing.
Yeah, I was pretty happy. I was like, that's a dirty spot to draft out of. And,
and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, this isn't bad.
Like, hey.
Chicken salad out of chicken. All right, let's move on to the next draft pick here. And we're back around to our guy, Uber Taco Supreme at the 202, who makes Tampa Bay wide receiver Chris Godwin, the wide receiver 6 off the board. That's exactly where he's being drafted right now, just a few spots later at the 207, 20th overall. I'll say this about Chris Godwin. He was the 4th most consistent wide receiver in 2019 with the likes of Jameis Winston. That should be reasonably safe to sustain with TB12 coming to town. And I'd honestly take Chris Godwin over DeAndre Hopkins and Tyreek too, Jay. Uber going wide receiver to start. Why am I not surprised?
Yeah, but somehow he'll amazingly sneak into the playoffs and make a run at it, because that's just how it works out. But, if you're going to pick wide receiver here, like you said, I love this pick. I love this player. It's a little bit rich. It's a little bit dicey, ignoring running backs. But, man, it's a tough one. It's a tough one at this call. I like the running back who goes next. There's still some value on the board, but I don't hate the pick. Not the 2 picks I would have made out of Uber, but...
Yeah, and again, we talked about wide receivers last week, and, one of the things was, it's like, hey, I think Chris Godwin's probably pretty safe to say you can lock him up as a wide receiver 1 in the 2020 season. So, somebody who you know what you're getting when you pick him, like you think there's definitely a solid floor. But when we're talking ceiling, I think wide receiver 6 might be right around like possibly a ceiling for him. So like you said, Jay, running back that's going to go off the board next, you could see where there could potentially be a little more value there. And it's at a position that, it's just, it's at a running back's a premium in my mind compared to wide receivers.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. And moving on to the next pick, we did see a running back come off the board. Our buddy Travis at the 203 makes Philadelphia Eagles running back Miles Sanders the running back 9 off the board. And that is a couple spots ahead of where he's going in ADP currently as the RB11. In my opinion, it's a rock solid pick by Travis here.
Yes.
I love that he valued him more than Mixon and Josh Jacobs. But I may be in the minority in this opinion, but I still like Eckler just a little bit more than Sanders in full PPR leagues, because I think Boston Scott's going to vulture a little bit of that PPR upside from Miles. But like I said, can't argue with the pick too much. I expect big things from Miles Sanders in 2020, and it is definitely a nice running back to pair with Julio Jones to start off your draft.
No, you know what? I was actually pretty surprised that Miles went here. I feel like to your point, Ben, Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs, there are some names out there that I think people may look at before they get to a Miles Sanders. So I was pleased to see Miles Sanders go here, and I really like the pick. In fact, I would have been pressured if I was Uber on the previous pick not to go Miles Sanders instead of Chris Godwin. So, he fell, and I love the pick. Travis, I think, got a nice value right in this spot.
Yeah, precisely. I think that, Travis, hey, shout out to you. I get the impression, you know your stuff. You're pretty fantasy savvy. And, I like that you took Miles Sanders here.
Yep.
Like you guys said, very solid pick. And I'll say this. For me, it was between Kenny and Drake and Miles Sanders. So, Mixon, no. Jacobs, no. Eckler there. But for me, just, a little bit under the the two guys I was considering. So I really like that that you took Miles Sanders. Shout out to you.
Nice.
Absolutely. And next up, we had our buddy Caesar. Never a dull moment with him at the 204 spot, ready, willing, and able to take the first QB off the board, and that is none other than Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes. He is going right around there in typical drafts, according to current ADP, as the QB1 at the 206, just 2 spots behind where Caesar took him. I'd expect nothing less from my guy, Caesar. He always keeps it fun and exciting, and this pick was no exception. I knew he was eyeing those early quarterbacks, and he jumped all over Mahomes. Listen, I get it, but the early QB has never worked out for me personally, so I just wait on the position nowadays. That's my take on it.
Boy, if you're going to go quarterback early, obviously, future Hall of Famer Pat Mahomes is the correct choice here, for a guy who's going to throw 50-plus touchdowns this year and be the highest scoring player in all of fantasy football. How can you go wrong with this pick? Kudos, Caesar. I like it.
Jay, you were just extremely upset that he sniped you. And you didn't get a chance to hit your boy. Yeah, I mean, like you said, never a dull moment with Caesar. And, hey, he's taking me for a ride in Flag. Let's just say that. But, yeah, I mean, I love you, CMC. You're gone. But, yeah, okay, we'll disregard that remark. But, yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, though, man, the 204 certainly seems rich. And when you think about, you take a guy at QB1, if he's not going to finish like QB1 and do so emphatically, you're going to probably be a little bit disappointed. But, hey, if you are going to make that bet, I guess if I was going to make that bet, I'd probably say Lamar Jackson then Patrick Mahomes.
Well, yeah, it's, yeah.
Steve, I've never connected the dots until just now that you are in part responsible for me having CMC now. I appreciate that. I've never thanked you for that.
That's why I cry myself to sleep every night.
I mean, you never in a million years would have traded me CMC. So
no, I would not have.
That's great.
But my tears fall on that big, delicious trophy.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I hate you. All right, moving on to the 205. We have got our buddy Ryan back on the board, who surprised us all with DeAndre Hopkins at his in his first round pick, and then he made Joe Mixon from the Cincinnati Bengals the RB10. And right now, that's one spot behind where he's currently going in ADP as the RB9 at the 110 spot. And I got to say, I'm sorry to say it, Ryan, but I think our buddy goes 0 for 2 in his first 2 picks, in my opinion, pairing Mixon with Hopkins, despite better wide receivers remaining on the board in the first round, and at least in my opinion, 2 better running backs remaining on the board in the second round.
Yeah, I mean, this one's tough. I don't love the pick either. Sometimes, you're in a draft and things start breaking a certain way, and you start to feel pressured to make a move, and Mixon's on the board, and you're like, he's RB9 overall. I'm getting him at a little bit value at RB10. He slid a little bit, so it's a value, and I don't really want to make this pick, so I just grab him. and then you kind of regret it afterwards because you look at the rest of the board and how it breaks, and you're like, I could have had any number of guys coming up instead. So, not the best pick, really, out of Ryan. So, first 2 picks, Ryan, not great. But welcome to the league. Looking forward to it.
I'll go ahead and jump in here a little bit. And the funny thing is I'm not a big Joe Mixon guy, and I actually think RB10's probably about as high as I'd put him having a finish. However, he's pretty highly touted right now in the fantasy community, and you have some very very reliable experts that do have Joe Mixon like ranked as high as RB5. So when you think about it from that standpoint, you might be looking at RB10 and he falls to you at the 205, and you might be like, whoo, that is a value, and you are elated to pick him up. Now, only time's going to tell, who's right on that, or, if he finishes RB8 and he's kind of in between. But, I get it. But, as you guys know, personally, not for me, but I get the pick, and I could see how you could look at that as a value even.
Yeah, the talent's there. Like, in a vacuum, Joe Mixon's not a bad player, and I think we can all his situation has improved from 2019 to 2020. But the fact of the matter is there's a guy going right after him. There's several guys going after him that I feel more confident about heading into 2020. I might be wrong, but that's just based on my research and everything that we're doing here. So, and it starts with our next guy, Doc Kenny, again, coming up with another running back, pairing Austin Eckler at the 206 with Dalvin Cook, making Austin Eckler the RB11 in our league. And he is typically going as the RB12, right around the same spot at the 205. I got to say, I love this pick by Doc. Eckler was still RB4 in consistency from weeks 10 to 16, people. That's with Melvin Gordon on the football field. I understand that Phillip Rivers is gone, but I just don't see a world where Austin Eckler falls off the face of the earth. He was a high-end RB1 last year, and I think he's going to be in line for – I think he's being drafted right around his median to his floor.
This is a good bounce-back pick out of Doc. We really didn't like his first pick in Dalvin Cook, and that could end up turning around and could pay off big for him to pair Dalvin Cook and Austin Eckler together. But right now, this kind of makes up for that pick. It's a pretty decent tandem to roll into the season with. It really depends on what he does after this. But, yeah, I'm with you, Ben. This is a nice, good pick, probably very appropriate. Looking at the list and the running backs coming up, I like the upside here. So, like you said, good bounce-back pick by Doc.
Yeah, I'm pretty much right there with you guys. I feel like he's certainly not going to fall off the face of the earth, and there's a lot of people that are out there right now putting him into that like mid to low end RB2 conversation. I do think even with the pass regression we're going to see out of that offense, that seems a little bit too steep. I mean, we are talking full PPR right now, so he seems certainly safe at a draft price of RB11, and I kind of feel like that's probably going to be in the ballpark that he finishes at, and it's certainly a solid pick. The running back well is drying up, and it's drying up fast.
It is. It's interesting you bring that up because the next pick is mine. And you're right, Steve. The running back well was drying up, and there was a quarterback taken off the board, which really was super convenient because I got to snatch up my guy, somebody who, I've been on the bandwagon with from day one, right? Been a supporter of his since his college days. I can't wait to see him light it up again with his magic feet. I got to take Lamar Jackson, this year's QB1 overall, at the 207 mark, and I'm happy with it. He's going to lead me to another fantasy championship.
Are you just pandering for votes right now? Is that what you're doing?
I love the pick.
I don't believe you.
Hey, man, I've got Kamara, and now I'm pairing him with Lamar Jackson. Hey, do you guys want to just send me the trophy now?
I will.
That's 50 fantasy points a week right there, if not 70.
I will say that you are always high quarterback guy, early quarterback guy. I'd expect nothing less from you, especially when you feel like you're playing with house money after straight stealing Kamara at the 106.
Listen, I want to say this. I am very self-aware. I'm not proud of the fact that I tend to go quarterback early. It's a flaw. It's something I know about myself. I don't enjoy it. I'm going to meetings. It doesn't seem to be working, so we'll see what happens. I don't know. I did it again. But whatever. You guys all keep telling me how great Lamar Jackson is and about how he's going to score 1 million fantasy points a week. What's this game about? It's about scoring points every week.
Hey, I applaud you, Jay. That's all you can do. You take those steps to make yourself better. That's all you can do. But hey, when I do look at some of the guys that are coming off the board right after him, I get the enticement. Like, so here's the thing, you guys know me. I'm that first person who's out there saying, QB1, here's your typical regression. Record-breaking season, here's your typical regression.
Yep.
At least when it comes to Lamar Jackson, I can't just throw him into the same mold as all of those other guys. He's not Peyton Manning. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Dan Marino. He's not Tom Brady. He is not your prototypical pocket passer. He's actually, he's like a new age Mike Vick. He's something we've never seen before. So I can understand wanting to take a Lamar Jackson in the second round because of that. If he's healthy and he's on the field, he'll just end up with around 1,000 rushing yards this year. He just will. Exactly. Sure, the touchdown passes are going to come down. Some of those numbers are going to come down. But when you get that kind of production out of your quarterback on a week-to-week basis, I do get it. Is it for me? I don't know. It depends on where I'm drafting at and how the draft breaks. But
just wait till he takes another step forward in his passing evolution. He may be threatening for both the rushing and passing titles this season, guys.
He was a couple hundred yards off.
Now that you've drafted him, Jay, there's magically going to be a parked wave runner in the middle of the football field, and it's going to take him out. You're playing games over there. I don't know what you're doing drafting Lamar Jackson, but I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all.
I was stunned.
Next up, at the 208, our buddy Josh turned around and totally redeemed himself from his first pick and made Travis Kelce the tight end 1 off the board. Travis Kelce is going right around the same spot as the tight end 1 at the 209 instead of the 208 in ADP currently. And like I said, Josh recovered nicely after drafting DH ahead of Alvin Kamara. Kelce's numbers in 2019 were good for PPR wide receiver 6 overall and PPR wide receiver 8 in fantasy points per game. So Josh got himself a very nice, rock solid wide receiver 1 who happens to play at the tight end position. Nice pick, Josh.
Yeah, like you said, good bounce back pick, Josh. Taking the first tight end off the board. He is the tight end in fantasy football. Should be again. I have no expectation for his level to drop off this season. So, good bounce back pick, but, pairing tight end with DH, it's an interesting strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Yeah. Like you said, Ben, totally redeemed himself. When you think of who is still left on the board at this point in time, it's certainly a solid pick. And when you think about getting Kelce at the 209, that seems like a perfectly acceptable spot to take him at.
It was the 208, Steve.
So I'm sorry, the 208.
I'm just kidding, man.
Sorry, but still, perfectly acceptable spot to take him. You look at that like mid-range second round, kind of area, and again, just given your strategy and what's left on the board, he already went running back, so I get it. So kudos, Josh.
Absolutely. Next up, we've got our buddy Zach at the 209. He made Josh Jacobs the RB12. And, oddly enough, that's a value according to the ADP. Right now, he is going 10th overall at the 110 spot as RB8. Got to be honest, not exactly sure why. I'm just not a Josh Jacobs guy in full PPR leagues. I like him just fine as a mid to late RB2, which is exactly where he finished in 2019. I don't see his pass volume improving whatsoever. So unless you're projecting that offense to take a big time step and him to get in the end zone a lot more, I really don't know where the big time RB8 production is coming from a guy who finished as, I believe, like RB19 in PPR last year.
You know what? I was a Josh Jacobs guy heading into it, but after our running backs episode, he has tumbled down my draft board, and I can't fault the pick too much. Where he is going here, again, you're reaching for guys. Are you going to go Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones? You're going to go with a rookie and CEH? It's a little bit about preference here, and we're going to see a run again on running backs as everybody tries to snatch them up here in the early going. So, again, I still like Josh Jacobs. I don't like him going as high as he has in certain places. Certainly, RB8 at the 110 is way too expensive, so RB12 at the 209, it's a much better price in my mind.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, looking back to just a couple of weeks ago when we had our running back episode, I think his ADP was in the latter part of the first round. So, hey, hats off to our league.
And it still is, yeah. He was still RB8 at the 111, and he's still RB8 now at the 110.
All right, good. Well, we all see right through that, and he's going in the latter part of the second round. I feel like that's much more of an appropriate price tag. I mean, obviously, if he's healthy and he's on the field, even with the lack of PPR upside, he's going to get the goal line touches. He's going to get the volume on the ground. And there's only so many running backs in the league that have that. So, he's going to have to come off boards at some point in time. But yeah, I think we're all in the same spot when it comes to Jacobs, as far as it's not necessarily my jam, but I totally get the pick, and there's only so many guys like him that you can kind of bank on.
Let me take this one, Ben. Speaking of my jam, a guy who's going to put the ball in the end zone 30-plus times this year, Russ at the 210 takes the 13th running back off the board with Aaron Jones. Now, Aaron Jones, on average, has been going 19th overall as RB13 at the 205. So getting him at he's getting him a little bit later, but right on his RB13 price tag. So Russ sent us some comments about his pick, and he said, quote, "Even without 19 touchdowns," Jay is ridiculous for betting on that, "Packers are definitely featuring the run game. Plus, he's game script proof and gets plenty of passes." I can't argue too much with that rationale, except for the fact that I was dumb for taking the bet, because he was 13th in targets with 62. He was 12th in receptions with 47, but those reduced goal line carries certainly, well, they may concern Ben. They may concern Steve. They don't concern me. He's getting the goal line carries. Don't worry about it. That said, rookie's going to be fumbling the ball. Don't worry about it. That said, as your RB2 alongside Zeke as your RB1, I'd say that is certainly a solid start for Russ.
Without a doubt. I mean, that last line says it all. When Aaron Jones is your RB2 versus Zeke as your RB1, I like that as much as any running back combo to start your draft for sure.
No, I can't argue with that whatsoever.
Steve, anything to add?
All right.
Okay. No. I mean, you guys kind of hit, everything there really is about that. I'm not that concerned about A.J. Dillon at the end of the day. And, if A.J. Dillon gets a couple of goal line plunges this year, I kind of think man, Aaron Jones was really good on the goal line. He can find his way into the end zone. So
yeah.
It's just, don't even get me into the Packers draft this year.
But one thing, I understand that the three of us are a little bit down on Aaron Jones heading into 2020 just because he was so touchdown dependent in 2019, and it's hard to sustain that kind of volume. However, I am interested in what you guys have to think in comparing him with the next pick, because obviously Russ had the choice here. At the 211 mark, Mike takes as RB14 Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who has been going 21st overall at the 207 mark. So Mike's getting him at a little bit of a value there and right on the RB14 price tag. And, someone had to do it. And if Mike didn't pair him with Saquon, Ben was going to probably pair him with CMC. So there are admittedly a lot of unknowns when it comes to CEH, but the pass volume should definitely be there in that offense. And as you know, with that high octane passing game, so again, rookie running back coming into a great situation that really pumped him up the draft boards, and taking him versus a guy like Aaron Jones, a proven commodity in a known offense, who obviously, like Steve said, hyper efficient inside the 10-yard line. So where do you guys go with that? Where do you side with that currently?
I mean, from Mike's perspective, he didn't have that choice. I would be interested to have seen if he did.
Yeah.
I've typically known him to be an Aaron Jones guy, so I don't know if he would have necessarily preferred to roll the dice on the rookies, but I'm sure he saw the running back position drying up real fast. And, again, that's his running back too. He's not drafting him as his RB1. Right. He's got Saquon to be his rock solid RB1. And if Clyde Edwards is a much higher draft equity version of like Alvin Kamara as a rookie, but 16 weeks instead of like half the season, look out. I mean, on the other hand, Clyde Edwards-Helaire could have a very slow start, and this could be Damian Williams' offense for the first several weeks of the year. So it'll definitely be something to watch. I mean, he's definitely somebody that I was probably going to take. I probably would have made one of the same two picks that I ended up making, but I probably would have made Clyde Edwards-Helaire my first one.
Yeah, he's one of the more interesting players to me in all of fantasy football, especially guys that are going in like the upper echelon of rounds, just because there is such a wide range of outcomes, especially in the early part of the season. And we're talking really high draft capital. So there's certainly some risk involved, but my goodness, you think of someone with his talent and skill set, you have Andy Reid coming out and saying stuff like, this is like a better Brian Westbrook, sorry. And of course, that just makes you salivate. You think back to those days in the Eagles offense. So I certainly can't blame Mike here. He already has Saquon Barkley. So, as far as an RB2 is concerned, he can probably get away with a few slower weeks to start the season if, it takes a little bit of time for him to kind of upend Damian Williams, who is coming off of an incredible Super Bowl. So that certainly is what kind of muddies up the whole situation. But I think the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs, defending Super Bowl champions who had bigger needs than running back, spent their first round pick on this running back should speak volumes, though. So I really like the pick. I mean,
it's a great point.
If I could have him on my team, I would certainly like to. I think the upside is monumental.
I gotta say, I love the start by Mike here. Like you said, Saquon, and then pairing the elite, high-end, high upside rookie running back. It's a great way to start a draft.
Yeah, can't argue with it at all. Don't like seeing it very much, to be honest with you. And, but luckily I've got back-to-back picks here at the 212 and the 301. And, I decided to make Tampa Bay Buccaneers Mike Evans, the wide receiver 8, coming off the board. Right now in ADP, he's currently going as wide receiver 7, so I got a little bit of a value there. And if you listened to our last episode, what we learned in 2019 about the wide receivers, I spoke to his god-awful 57% catch rate last season on what I consider to be a very sustainable target share. So I expect the targets to still be there, but I expect the catch rate to go up a good 10+%. So with that, I expect the yards and the touchdowns to follow suit as well.
Yeah, you know what, Mike Evans, I love the value pick here. We saw Chris Godwin go much earlier in this draft. So really, he's going 28th overall, usually at the 302 mark as wide receiver 7. You snatched him up as wide receiver 8. I think there's great value here, and I like the Mike Evans pick.
So it's not that I dislike the pick whatsoever, but I was thinking about this more the other day. I know. So as far as his catch rate goes, I think a lot of the reason his catch rate was garbage is just a lot of his targets were garbage as far as, just Jameis Winston chucking up the ball. And I know you agree on that. So, yeah, I think his catch rate definitely will go up. I just don't know what his average depth of target will be, to where will that make up for him, being, I don't know. I guess for me, I just kind of feel like wide receiver eight's probably closer to his ceiling than anything.
All
But that
right.
doesn't, but that's
Steve,
still a WR1.
No, it's fine, Steve. Let's have the conversation real quick. Look at the players who go next down the draft board. Who are you going to take over Mike Evans?
There's a handful of guys I sure wouldn't, but there's a couple of guys, but it's further down. So, and this is interesting because Ben and I both kind of were in similar spots where we both have to double tap picks, and then you're kind of out of the game for 22 picks.
Right.
So that forces you sometimes to reach. Now, I mean, I know you're high on Mike Evans, so you didn't have to do that there.
Well, but to your point, Steve, peek behind the curtain, in formats like this, my ultimate preference is to start out running back. I have never in any league I've been at the 101 spot before. So I really, other than mock drafts, don't have any experience with that. And I really didn't like the idea of not taking any wide receiver until the back end of the fourth round, because, in a vacuum, I would have preferred to take, say, maybe, the next guy I took, Todd Gurley, and then another running back a few spots down the list in my flex spot. But I did feel like Mike Evans was a good value, especially when I don't just consider where he's at that round 2-3 turn, but you have to consider where you rank him anywhere from now until your next pick 2 rounds later at the end of the fourth. Yep. And so as far as wide receivers went, he was definitely my best wide receiver on the board, even though my preference in a vacuum would have been to go running back. And that's exactly what I did with my next pick at the 301. I made Todd Gurley of the now Atlanta Falcons, the RB15 off the board. And that's exactly in line where he's going in full PPR formats at the, he's going right now to the 211 spot, also has the RB15. And this is what has changed about Gurley's season. Number one, everybody likes to say that he's injured and such. Like, he missed 1 game due to injury last season. He was fine down the stretch. He passed the physical and got signed by a new team. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have done that if they were concerned about his health, number one. So with that being said, he's going from a struggling offense, a bad offensive line, and being just 21st in targets to going to a great offensive line on a great offense. And he's going to get all the running back targets on a team that likes to target their running backs. So I think pairing him with Christian McCaffrey and then having Mike Evans as my wide receiver 1, that is a rock solid first 3 picks that I'm feeling really good about.
I think the value is appropriate, and I hear everything you have to say. I still have a little bit of concern as to what production we will actually see out of him, and really just looking down the draft board, honestly, Ben, I have been liking getting Melvin Gordon at a great value, in the 3rd, 4th round, or as late as I can possibly get him. That would have been my only question mark. At this point, do I go Gurley? Do I go Melvin Gordon? And I guess to your point, Gurley at least is going to get, 90% of the carries out of that backfield, whereas Gurley, it's a crowded backfield. He's going to be the guy because you follow the money, and I get all that, but he's in a little bit more of a timeshare. And to your point, Gurley is in a much better offense.
I think he's got a better O-line. He's got a better offense overall. Yeah, and he's got less competition for sure. Yeah. But it's interesting that you bring him up. I wasn't going to bring him up, but if I was willing to just kind of punt on the wide receiver position a little bit, it was going to be Todd Gurley and Melvin Gordon, and I was going to start my draft with CMC, Todd Gurley, and Melvin Gordon.
Not bad. Hey.
Yeah, right.
Steve, if you want to comment, go ahead, and then I got an audible for you guys.
Yeah, I was just going to say that when it comes to Todd Gurley and Melvin Gordon, Todd Gurley, even though he's perceived as the injury-prone one, I would say he is well beyond a healthier player overall as far as making appearances on the field in comparison to Melvin Gordon throughout their careers. And then, so Ben, as much as I wasn't dogging Mike Evans, I'm personally lower on him probably than a lot of people are, but Todd Gurley, I am also a lot higher on than a lot of people are. I view Todd Gurley as someone who, in this Atlanta, you think of where he finished last year in what was really just a really horrible situation
Clunky
for him absolutely. Him going to that Atlanta offense with that line, with those weapons around him, the way they will utilize him in the passing game, which he just vanished from the Rams passing game inexplicably last season. If he's on the field even 14 games, he will finish as an RB1 this season. I feel very strongly about that. So getting him at the 301 as the RB15 in our draft, I think that is a great value because I don't see him finishing like RB15 to me seems like his floor. So I love the Todd Gurley pick. I'd like to have him on my team.
I got an audible for you guys. We have made the turn into the third round. Ben has covered both of his picks at this turn. We are an hour and 10 minutes into this episode. What do you say we punt on covering the rest of the third round? Our intent was to cover the entire first 3 rounds. What do you say we cut it off here and get to our favorites and least favorites from this draft, and then we'll release the fans to the polls to decide the winner?
That sounds great, but since it's your idea, you got to go first. Who do you like?
Okay.
Boom.
That's fine. All right.
In your face.
So the challenge was the challenge was laid down by Ben to pick our 3 favorite rosters from this draft, and we couldn't pick any of our 3. So no Steve, no Ben, no Jay on the selections here, and I gotta say, it was so much more difficult to pick 3 rosters that I like top to bottom than it was to pick 3 rosters I didn't like top to bottom. So, I gotta say, I believe, picking 3, I gotta say, it might be very tough. I'm gonna give you my winner for this draft as of this moment that is not on this podcast right now, and that is our guy, Russ, at Foresight FFPT, Foresight PT. He goes Zeke and Aaron Jones, and Aaron Jones, I know we're a little bit down on, but, when you're pairing him with Zeke, like we said, not bad. He follows that up with George Kittle. He takes one of the tight ends early, which I know if you're not going to get one of the elite tight ends, you should wait, but he ends up going elite tight end with upside. Where I really liked his draft is where he starts to go now, and that is pairing Calvin Ridley, A.J. Brown, and Michael Gallup with value picks at wide receiver. You're not getting the big, flashy, high-end elite names, but you're also not drafting these guys in the first 3 rounds. You're drafting them in rounds 4, 5, and 7. So I love those.
And don't forget about Tyler Boyd in the 9th.
And Tyler Boyd in the 9th. You're right. Yes, great picks. And then he goes high upside rookie and kind of like safe. Look, he goes high upside rookie with J.K. Dobbins. And then pairs that with, listen, we could debate all day Rojo and the Tampa Bay offense and what we actually expect out of him this year, but at least to start the season, it should be some solid production. So, and then he goes, as we've all been saying, quarterback very last in the draft and gets a nice, safe Carson Wentz. I really like the draft. Again, Aaron Jones I don't love, but I don't know really what else he could have done there that would have really hit a home run in that spot. But I love the middle of the draft picks at wide receiver. Really cements in the rest of the draft.
Absolutely. And he made a great point in his comments about Deebo Samuel from the 49ers and the historical impact that foot injuries have on wide receivers from his professional physical therapist perspective. So he feels like the number 1 target on that offense is going to be George Kittle, and that's why he spent his 3rd round draft equity on him.
Hey, I love
and
it.
I have to agree with you, Jay. Outside of our 3, his roster is the one that every single pick I'm good with. There's not one pick on his team that I have a problem with. And kudos to Russ, buddy. The top out of the other 9 for sure.
Steve, what say you?
I can't really disagree. When I look at the roster top to bottom, and one of the things I like the most too is when I look at, I guess, his, flexible guys as far as Tyler Boyd, Ronald Jones, J.K. Dobbins, those are all guys that, I was hoping like, maybe one of those guys will get back to me at some point in time in this draft. And, obviously didn't come close, but, I just think like really good depth for a 10-round draft, and any one of those guys, given the situation and the matchup, will make a fine flex player. So, and you guys said it all as far as the actual starters are concerned. Just a really strong lineup, top to bottom.
All right, guys, you got anything else? Anybody else you can throw in the top three, or did you have as hard a time finding another roster you loved outside of those four now?
You know what? I had a second one for sure coming into this episode. And, as I've reviewed, I do believe I have a third honorable mention as well.
Let's go.
So number 2 on my list is our buddy Travis. Okay. I really like Julio Jones and Miles Sanders at the top of the draft.
Yeah.
I'm not as high on the James Conner and Amari Cooper picks, but I love Kareem Hunt in the slot. Stephon Diggs as your wide receiver 3, got Gronk as his tight end. It's not really sexy, but now that Cam's coming to town in the 9th round, he's got Sony Michel, who has the chance to be a legitimate starting running back on a Bill Belichick offense. And then he gets Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback Tom Brady with his last pick. Waiting on quarterback, that's a high upside pick. I understand that could fizzle out. And you know what? So does Travis. That's why I picked him with his last pick.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, he's got no problem cutting bait and moving on.
I love the value pick, too, of Sony Michel. He has fallen way down draft boards, just like a Kerryon Johnson. And, look, these guys all of a sudden didn't stop playing football. And I understand that there's some injury risk with some of these guys, but they're still going to be high-volume players. So, getting that guy in the 9th round, oh, yeah, I love that. And he's going to be on your bench. What are we doing? All right, I love the pick.
Yeah, interestingly enough, today I was trying to do a little bit of research for the preview podcast that we have coming up, and I was breaking down some of the red zone rushing, goal line rushing. And interestingly enough, Sony Michel had the seventh most red zone carries in the entire NFL and 9th most within the 5-yard line. So
wow.
Certainly has a defined role there, it seems. So yeah, it was interesting. He was one of those guys that's just like, oh crap, at the 9-10, he's still hanging around. So definitely my favorite value pick on there. I ain't gonna lie, James Conner, and you guys know how I feel about Amari Cooper.
Yeah, but, trust me, I'm well documented on Mr. Cooper. I'm not hanging with him.
Yeah, so but yeah, definitely, I gave him a shout out on Miles Sanders a little bit earlier. But I don't know about you guys, but it's just really hard. I don't know what it says about me, but it's really hard for me to look at a lot of these rosters and pick ones out that I either really like or I don't like. I look at each one and I think it's just, probably my own preferences and things that I like and I like to do in drafts where I'm like, I don't like that. I would never do that. Oh, this is a great pick. Oh, but that's not a good pick. Oh, your receivers are bad, but your running backs are good. Oh, you're right. So it's just really, really hard for me to kind of pinpoint.
It's got to be perfect.
Yeah, it's just, it's hard for me to pinpoint or, say I like one team way more than the other. But again, going back, Russ, I know you're watching. Kudos. You had a heck of a draft, man. Good team, top to bottom.
For
All
sure.
right.
Absolutely.
Well, then,
now, wait.
Fine.
I
God,
know
I'm just
you
so
are
eager to tear into
you
these
guys.
guys.
Are
Hurry
so
up.
eager to tear people down. I know. Hang on. As we went through this episode and I was paying a little bit closer attention, somebody who had some sneaky good picks, top to bottom, our buddy Zach.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael Thomas at the top of the draft, PPR machine. I said that I'm not as high on Josh Jacobs, but we discussed how he got him at a very nice value point at the draft compared to his ADP.
Yep.
Chris Carson is not currently healthy, but they, all signs are pointing to him being the guy from day one. And if that is the case, then he's got himself a really nice running back too. Russell Wilson, year in and year out, is a quarterback one. DJ Shark had a great season last year. Brandon Cooks should be a sneaky target hog as long as he can stay healthy. James White should be a sneaky target hog.
Sweet feet.
Yep, absolutely. Austin Hooper in the 8th, I know there's a lot of mouths to feed, but Baker likes his tight ends, and Stefanski likes his to run 2 tight end sets. So, I like that pick too. In the 9th, he goes nice upside with Henry Ruggs.
Love that.
And in the 10th,
yeah.
And the 10th, sneaky PPR pick. Baker Mayfield has real chemistry with Rashard Hollywood Higgins. Believe it. Zach picked him just to kind of make a statement, and I'm glad that I studied his roster and get to throw a shout out to Hollywood Higgins because he is the slot receiver for the Cleveland Browns. For some reasons, Freddie Kitchens didn't feel like playing him last year. Just another great coaching decision along the way. But now that he is back with that chemistry with Bake, look out for some sneaky, totally free wide receiver production.
I'll tell you what, I really love the Ruggs pick too. I mean, that you talk about a rookie burner that you can get in the 9th round with some upside. I mean, he definitely did go value and upside later in his draft and really had some nice picks. Do we get to tear into people now?
Steve doesn't want to comment on it, so yes, go ahead.
Yes. All right. Let's get to our least favorite. Where do I start?
I don't know. I was taught if you don't have anything
Starting
nice to say, you don't say anything at all.
Since I couldn't pick either of your rosters, I got to pick one of these other jokers.
Yeah.
Okay, so with my 5th worst team, I'm going to go with...
You have a rank!
I'm kidding. All right. I think the one that really annoys me the most is our buddy Josh. All right. Sorry, bud. DH in the first. You go DH instead of Kamara. That's your first strike. Okay, it comes around and you go Kelsey because you don't like what's on the board. Fine, I can live with that. You go Kenny Golladay next because you feel like you need to get a receiver to pair with your running back and your tight end early. I can even stomach that. Okay. Then you go Kyler Murray in the 4th round?
No, man. Don't do it.
Okay.
Don't do it.
What did that do to his draft?
Who?
By taking Kyler Murray there, he could have had Russ's wide receiving core of Calvin Ridley, A.J. Brown, and Michael Gallup to pair with his running backs had he gone that route. But no, he went Kyler Murray. Guys, in the last 3 rounds, you had Matt Stafford, Carson Wentz, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and Matt Ryan going several rounds after that. But no, he wanted to go quarterback early, and so he went with the elite QB of Kyler Murray. Okay, so then he pairs that up with Keenan Allen. Again, great wide receiver. I have no idea what that offense is going to be this year, but I have very low expectations. So hopefully I won't be too disappointed when it sputters. Then he goes upside with Cam Akers in the Rams offense, which is a fine pick. I don't mind that in the 6th round, late 6th round. Nice running back pick. The problem is that's his RB2. So, you're really taking a shot there and hoping that it pays off for you. Then he follows it up with...
Well, at least he has Derrick Henry as his RB1.
Yeah, right. So then he follows it up with CeeDee Lamb in the 7th. Again, I like CeeDee Lamb. I like the potential there. I just don't know how prolific he's going to be year 1 in that offense. There's a lot of mouths to feed, a lot of receivers now on that offense. Again, I like the player, but I'd like to take that player a lot later and not have him be in my starting lineup. Darius Geis is next. A guy who just can't stay on the field, and they drafted a running back who a lot of people are excited about and who actually is durable so far in his career.
Only have 18 running backs on their roster.
They do. You're right.
I was going to say, they brought in Peyton Barber. They brought in Peyton Barber. Adrian Peterson's still around. I don't know.
Okay, and then he goes value at Deontay Johnson. That's a fine pick. I don't hate that. And then then Matt Breed at the end. Again, not my cup of tea, but whatever. Again, that all adds up to just a lot of not my cup of tea. The Kyler Murray pick just started I don't even know. I can't. It just fell off.
You're right, Jay. I really wanted I really wanted to go with Ryan because I was not happy with him about his first two selections of DeAndre Hopkins as the wide receiver 2 with Julio and DA still sitting out there. Was not a fan of him going Joe Mixon in the second round, but he turned it all around for me when he went A-Rob in the third. So anybody who drafts A-Rob is A-okay with me.
And you know what?
So that's what tipped.
And I liked his pick of Devin Singletary in the 5th. That's a nice pick. There's reports.
Don't forget about DJ Moore in the 4th too. I mean, that's a fine pick as well.
Right.
Right. But like I said, I after his first 2 picks, I wanted it to be Ryan. I quickly realized that it wasn't Ryan, and I agree with you. It's Josh. I mean, the running backs, your running backs heading into a full fantasy season is Derrick Henry, Cam Akers, Darius Geis, and Matt Breida. Your wide receivers are Kenny Golladay, Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, and Deontay Johnson. Your quarterback's Kyler Murray. Thank God your tight end is Travis Kelce, or you'd be like sunk. So yeah, bud, we got to talk. We got some work to do before the draft.
With that lineup, you're not starting Darius Geis or Matt Breida heading into the season. So that means you're starting CeeDee Lamb in your flex. Like, I mean, it's just compared to the rest of the rosters we see, there's some.
All I know is I feel like we definitely probably all then see eye to eye here. Not that you could probably read my scribbles, but there's favorite Foresight PT, least underlined. Oh, I can't read it, but that's little Josh's team. So,
and we love you, Josh. We all do.
Yeah, it's tough in in these mock drafts because as we've seen it time and time again, you can be the paper champion and be last place.
That's true.
We see it happen year in and year out. But those are my chicken scratch notes I was jotting down before we hopped on and writing down rosters. It was like my clear favorite, my clear least favorite.
Yep.
And I think we're all on the same page.
All right, so now the real competition begins. And Ben, you've got a tough order in the first round because it's clear that we all kind of like Russ, and you're grouped with him in the first round pairing. For everybody watching now on Sportscaster, YouTube, and wherever else we're showing up right now, live on our Twitter page, you can go view the entire draft. The polls are now up and ready for voting. We've got them grouped into 4 different groups of 3. Go out. You can check out the lineup. We grouped them the first 3 picks in the draft, the next 3 picks in the draft, and so on. We wanted to just group guys who had very similar draft positions, so that way you were comparing at least the closest spots as possible, so you had some similar picks. So, again, Ben, you're going up against Foresight, or you're going up against Russ in the first round. Going to be a tall order. Everybody watching, go out, vote for your favorite rosters. We're going to pare this down and eventually crown a winner, and which is going to have ultimate bragging rights. And hey, if you go vote, we may just pull a random winner or 2 and send you some free merch. So, gotta love that.
Always gotta love that.
Yeah.
I mean, man, I like the 12-person mock a lot better than last season's mock, where we only had 4 or 5 actual people in that. So, very enlightening, very interesting to see where guys are at this point. The ADPs and the perceptions and everything is going to change, and it's going to start on this podcast next week with our preview episodes.
And I just want to say before we do bounce off this thing, if our flagmates have just seen me randomly laughing or smiling and it doesn't seem to pertain to anything that's going on related to the podcast, it's because I've been glancing down at your guys' comments.
Oh no, where are they leaving comments right now?
on Facebook, and it's tickled me, let's just say. So
phenomenal. Cannot wait to go and check those out.
Exactly. So thanks, guys. But yeah, definitely had a lot of fun. Wish we could just keep going for like 10 more hours and talk through the rest of the draft. But there's this thing called real life.
Yep. Well, hey, that was a fun episode, guys. I hope everybody watching enjoyed it. We have a holiday weekend coming up. Everybody, please enjoy the 4th of July. Be safe. be responsible. Don't do what I would do or do what I would do. I don't know, but just take care of yourself, be safe, and enjoy the holiday.
Yeah, it's going to be a great one, especially when we come back, because all of a sudden we have the very interesting quarterbacks and running backs of the AFC East.
Let's go.
It's preview season, everybody.
All right.
Can't wait.
And that wraps up this episode of Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We thank you for joining us. Be sure to visit us, as always, at fantasyforesight.com. Use the links at the bottom of the page to find us across social media, including Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you pod. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next time.